Now you have a president who is giving you what you want. So let's see how you respond. America is backing you with overwhelming strength and devastating force. Now is the time to seize control of your destiny and to unleash the prosperous and glorious future that is close within your reach. This is the moment for action. Do not let it pass. May God bless the brave men and women of America's armed forces. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless you all. Thank you.
And that video from President Trump posted at 3 a.m. overnight, and senior White House correspondent Peter Doocy is live from the North Lawn with the latest there. Peter.
Dana, the latest word here is coming from the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt. She is telling us President Trump monitored the situation overnight at Mar-a-Lago alongside members of his national security team. The president spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu by phone. Prior to the attacks, Secretary Rubio called all members of the Gang of Eight to provide congressional notification, and he was able to reach and brief 7 of the 8 members. The president and his national security team will continue to closely monitor the situation throughout the day. President Trump is making the case to the world watching these strikes that Iran basically didn't get the message Midnight Hammer sent. And despite sustaining major damage caused by the B-2 bombing run then to their nuclear facilities, Iran kept trying to build a nuke, according to administration officials. President Trump told the nation overnight it is possible now that American servicemen and women could be lost in this mission. And he told us yesterday there's really no way to guarantee that it will be a quick hit.
Is there a risk that strikes could turn into a long, drawn-out conflict in the Middle East?
I guess you could say there's always a risk. You know, when there's war, there's a risk in anything, both good and bad. Look, it'd be wonderful if they'd negotiate really in good conscience, good faith and conscience, but they are not getting there.
President Trump also told us yesterday, before he left for a political rally in Texas, that nobody has briefed him while they were going over options for strikes in Iran. Nobody has briefed him to say that strikes like these would definitely guarantee regime change in Iran. There is nobody here who has put a high probability on that, or at least not a certainty on that. Something else that we are learning, as we were just replaying the president's remarks from overnight, an FBI official reached out to let me know that counterterrorism and counterintel teams have been put on high alert, elevated alert nationwide, just in case there's any kind of retaliation from Iran or their proxies here in the United States. Dana.
And Peter, do you think that we would see the president again today?
It's possible. He initially, there was some talk about him maybe attending a fundraiser later in the evening. We don't know if he still plans to attend it, but there's no plan for him to address the nation from Mar-a-Lago. So it's possible the next time that we see him is when he comes back to the White House tomorrow.
Okay, Peter, let's go through the time frame this past week, just the past 5 days. In fact, on Tuesday, you had Marco Rubio meeting with those 8 senators on Capitol Hill. Okay, now that's before the State of the Union. Think about how many events we have watched over the past 5 days. And the Democratic senators came out to the microphone, and they reacted with a lot of concern, frankly. And then you had the President of the United States in his State of the Union that evening talk about Iran must say we will not have a nuclear weapon. And you had this 10-day deadline that was running, and it looks to me on the calendar like the U.S. and Israel hit on day 9 of that day 10 calendar. And you had reporters like Mark Halperin filing photos earlier today. While we were watching the president in Corpus Christi, Texas on Friday afternoon, you had General Kane, you had the Department of War, head of the Department of War, Pete Hegseth, all arriving in Palm Beach, Florida on separate planes on Friday afternoon. And how much of that were you observing from the White House? And how much of a heads up did you and others have toward the possibility of action in the middle of the night?
President Trump was pretty candid over the last couple of weeks that he felt if the negotiating team that was meeting with Iran or meeting with middlemen who were talking to Iran, if things were not going well, then he would just order another mission like Midnight Hammer. Obviously, this one is much more widespread, but President Trump was not really keeping any of this a secret. He was very candid that he was not satisfied with the way that negotiations were going, and he felt like he needed to leave all options on the table publicly. And so this is something that the whole world could see it. It's just you never really know when the president is going to do things because, again, this is a president that you can ask him about anything and he'll give you a candid, blunt answer. And he was telling us about 24 hours ago that he had not made up his mind, but it would appear that while he was giving this political speech yesterday in Corpus Christi, the final pieces of the operation were being moved into place. And basically as soon as he landed at Mar-a-Lago, that would be when the team got together, the national security team. And as far as the planes that were there down in Palm Beach, it's not uncommon to see extra blue and white planes like that when the president is in town, just because he does travel with a lot of staff, and it's not out of the ordinary for John Ratcliffe or J.D. Vance to pop in for a meeting.
Got it, Peter. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.